And welcome back for another episode of Dragonheads podcast. I am your master of ceremonies, Thorn Rain. With me, as always, my two co-hosts. We've got Dragon Joe and Dungeon Kyle. How you guys doing this evening?
Hanging
Doing
in there.
great.
Fantastic. Not a whole lot of news going on, so we're gonna roll right into our top three here. We're gonna be talking about the stats that each of us feel are our top three. These are kind of subjective. So, Joe, why don't you kick us off with your top three? Because I got a feeling there's a trend here.
Well, the thing is that now one of the things I will say is based on what class you are, your stats, what stats are important are always going to matter. But overarchingly, like regardless of what character you're doing, like the stats that I never want to dump.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that's kind of my how I rank importance. I never want to dump con, ever, 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 ever. It's one of those things because it has your HP. It's important to always make sure it's a positive number. Like there's nothing worse than trying to figure out like, oh, I've got a -1 to con. I rolled my hit die and got a 0.
It leads
Like
to
that's the
interesting
worst.
gameplay.
Sure does, but I gotta say it's one of the worst feelings in the world when you level up and you don't get any extra HP. Um, number two, dexterity. It it's one of those weird things that dexterity is. It's probably the most common saving throw. Um, it affects your initiative, and it affects like all of your skills that you have. I feel like the ones with dexterity are ones that tend to pop up or crop up more often because you have your stealth, which is based off of dexterity, sleight of hand, which is based off dexterity, acrobatics, which is based off dexterity, and what am I forgetting? I know there's a fourth one that's based off dexterity. I'm just blanking out what it is right now. But those are common skills that I see adventurers constantly using. Oh, lockpicking.
Yep.
Lockpicking is always based off of dexterity. Although some roulette and sleight of hand, whatever. It's another skill based off dexterity. And those seem to be the skills that adventurers need to use a lot, for lack of a better word. You're constantly sneaking through the shadows. You're constantly having to pick locks. You're constantly having to parkour up something, and and the fact that it affects your initiative to boot, and it's the most common saving throw against against lightning, against fire, against a lot of different things. That tends to be the next most important ones for me. You dump it, yeah, but I almost never want to dump it. And the last one is wisdom. And my whole thought process about wisdom is fear saving throws and any sort of saving throw that has a like I feel like whenever you're attacking like any sort of charm effect, anything like that, it's always seems to be attacking wisdom. And it's not exclusive or anything, but it's one of those things that as you sit there and listen to it, or as you sit there and play through a game, you'll find that oh man, I'm making a lot of wisdom saving throws, and that there's nothing worse than being the barbarian that dumped wisdom, and every charm effect ever works on you. It's the most annoying thing in the world.
It really is.
But
And, and honestly, I
those
agree
are
with
my
it.
yeah, those are my top three. What's your top three, Kyle?
Well, honestly, I thought I was gonna like surprise you guys, but you surprised me by taking wisdom. That's honestly gonna be one of mine too. Just because for the same kind of reason you did. Saving throws. If you're a barbarian, all the charm effects and everything, but mainly saving throws. Fifth edition really hits wisdom saving throws hard. The second one's going to be intelligence, mainly because there's a lot of skills that require intelligence. Your perception checks, a wizard relies heavily on intelligence. I I can't think of anything off the top of my head because I'm under pressure.
Uh, I think you mean investigation checks.
There you
Perception
go.
is wisdom
Yes.
based.
Thank you. Investigation.
I believe me, it's one of those things where like wisdom, because wisdom has that perception aspect to it. That's another reason why it's always nice to be able to see what the heck you're looking at.
Too. And then
And what
the
was your third one?
obviously Dex, because fifth edition has put such a heavy emphasis on your Dex modifier and being incorporated in a lot of things. Saving throws is a big one, let alone your stats is another one. And it's included in your AC, let alone down to your saving throws. It's huge. It's probably my number one priority in stat. Like when I start a new character, and then, honestly, try dumping con one time. It is kind of fun. It really is.
Ah, all
Yeah,
right, Thorn. What are your three?
me and you, Joe, have the same three, but I've prioritized mine in a different order. You had Constitution as your number one. Constitution's my number two. Uh, I put Dex in the first one simply because of the amount of checks. Um, if you're trying to just not even like hide in the shadows, but if you want to walk through a bar unnoticed, you're gonna have to do a stealth check. Like I I feel that you're doing more stealth checks or dexterity checks when it comes to those things, and it's I believe in mitigating damage more so than having high health pools. If I can mitigate it by being able to dodge it with the dexterity saving throws, avoid a fight by using stealth, sleight of hand being able to pull something. That's why I put the dex as my number one. Constitution number two. So I just flipped those with you, simply because that's your health stat. Um, I'm not I'm not sure I would want to play with dumping Constitution to where
It's interesting. I'm
y-
telling you guys, it's fun.
you walk by a frog and it jumps on your foot and you fall over
It's a
unconscious.
game at a
Like,
different perspective.
I don't see. I've never played a caster class where I would assume that like your glass cannons, um, simply because I'm terrified of being one shot. So, um, Constitution definitely high up on my list, and then my third one was also Wisdom, which was more for the perception check, just being able to see things around me. You got your animal handling. So far, all of the game and campaigns that I've played in really haven't had to do animal handlings, but insight and perception have always been huge things, no matter what the campaign is that I've played in. That I feel like that's more of a needed stat than something along the lines of, you know, obviously based on class, strength, or, intelligence. But again, like everyone said, it's based on your class. If you're rolling a barbarian, you're just pounding out the strength because you kind of need that for your damage modifiers. But my top three that I like to keep in focus are the Dex, Constitution, and Wisdom.
All right. Well,
So,
that's going to lead into our main discussion, though,
which is the big one?
which is yeah. Well, it was one of those things that whenever I looked at, well, hey, we're doing our 10th episode, and I'm like, wait a second, we've gone 9 episodes and we've talked about a bunch of different things, and I'm like, well, we haven't talked about how to like make stats, how to generate stats. So that's what we're doing today, and the the first two distinctions is you have rolling for stats and you have like stat allocations, the standard array point buy, which I feel are almost interchangeable. It's there's slight differences between those two, but they're the same idea.
Mhm.
See, I'm
And
extremely new to point buy. I've only done it a few amount of times. So
well, and there's advantages to both. And I feel like with point buy and standard array, one of the big things that I've noticed is that when I was playing Adventurers League, whenever somebody, they're like, "Hey, do I roll for stats? Do I do this? Do that?" You're like, "No, just use the standard array." And the reason Adventurers League does that, and I can attest to this, is that you'll always have that one random guy or that one random kid that comes in and they're like, "Oh, I rolled my stats," and they've got 3 18s, a 15,
Mhm.
and a 14, and a 12. They just have these insane stats, and they're like, "No, we're not we're not rolling for stats here." It's one of those things that it was one of whenever they created Adventures League, they knew those people were out there that always are gonna. Well, I rolled my stats and they're crazy. No, it's one of those things that it's not that they're saying that the person's
keeps
dishonest,
everything equal.
but yeah, it keeps everything on a level, with all that. And the biggest advantage to point buy and standard array is that if I'm playing, especially like a campaign where characters tend to die, I can whip up another character really quick because I know what the stats are.
Yep.
I can make backup characters because I know what the stats are. Um, Even if it's whatever I want to try to do, okay, I want to make sure that he has this weakness and this strength, and all I have to do is whip it up. You can get on D&D Beyond, put in your standard array, put in your point buy, and go to town. Versus rolling for stats, you need the DM to kind of see it, and even in like our groups, it's one of the things that we've moved to playing online a lot. So okay, there's a little bit of like we rolled the stats online, and it's a little more recorded, I guess is the best way to put it. So you say, hey, I rolled these are the stats I rolled, and because I rolled these stats, you guys saw it, and I have a record of it in the chat, and so it's a little like it's keeping everything, make sure nobody's cheating, make sure nobody's you know rolling loaded dice or whatever way you want to kind of look at it. But let's start. The other thing I was going to say is that the other ideas. Um, we'll start with rolling, and with rolling, there's two um, thought processes about generating the stats and how they're put into the character sheet. The first one is called inline rolling. So that first roll, whatever it is your strength stat. Your second roll is dexterity. Your third roll is constitution. So it puts it in line. I feel like this is something that you want to do with a more like a veteran group, because at that point you're making character creation a challenge, and it's like, okay, I have these stats, what can I make with them?
I was like, yeah,
Versus the other
the inline very
good.
much seems like it's a I roll my stats and then decide what I'm playing, whereas
Yes.
with the
But
next
the
one, it's I decide what I'm playing, then roll my stats.
Absolutely, and that's what I was getting to with allocating your stats. You roll your stats, but then you're like, well, I want to play a warlock, so I'm going to put my highest number as my charisma modifier. If I want to play a barbarian, well, I'm going to make strength my biggest modifier, and doing that lets you be more flexible, be more um, be able to create the character the way you want the character you want to play. And I like your analogy because it's exactly what I say. If you're rolling in line, you're looking at it as more of, I'm making this character, and then I'm going to figure out what their background, what their, you're figuring everything out about the character after you roll the stats. When you're doing it the other way around, it's like you have this character idea or concept, and then you're rolling stats just to fill in numbers. And
Like, I'm totally for the first of the two. Like, I'd much rather roll my stats and then figure out what my character's gonna be. To me, I feel like it's just a little bit more engaging. You really don't have control on, like, if you're doing inline, you don't have control on what you're gonna do. You might want to go into this game wanting to run a rogue, and you roll a 12 in dexterity. Well, that sucks. Move on. You know. So there goes that. I don't know. I enjoy it, but I see the great benefits of standard array. And is it the standard point by 27?
yes, and we'll get to that in a minute.
Okay.
But with rolling for stats, the most common way to roll for stats is you get 4d6, you roll it and drop whatever the lowest is, and that way you roll it, you add the three highest numbers, and you tend to get a reasonable stat. Now there's always that chance that you roll all 10s and 11s and you have this like farmer, for lack of a better word. And I've heard the idea of uh, if your stats aren't, like, if you don't have certain requirements for the stats, like anything you don't have anything above like a 15, you're basically, well, that character is gonna become a farmer and never go adventuring, is the way I've heard it put. And it's the idea that you have something special. You have that big physical strength. You have that charismatic, you know, twinkle in your eye. You have that intelligence that is above everyone else's. And if you don't have those sort of things, you're not going to become an adventurer. There's no incentive there. You know what I mean?
Mm,
And go ahead.
Well, like, you make a valid point. And so, like, if you want to kind of save time, I've even heard in my preferred way is 46 reroll ones. If you're feeling nice, maybe reroll ones and twos. But usually reroll ones that saves you a lot of time from getting those characters that don't have the stats enough to go adventure.
And I get that, but it's one of those things that if you have subpar stats, that you just roll a crappy set of stats. It's nice to be able to just kind of push them all aside rather than saying, oh well, I can make them all 12s because I re-rolled a 1 and I rolled a 3 instead. You know,
True.
but that's the first method I've heard of is 46 and you drop the lowest.
And that's
And
literally the only one I've ever done. Until we were doing research for this, I had no clue there was so many ways to roll.
Really?
Like, yeah, no clue. I've only ever done 46, drop the lowest.
See, I knew there was point
eh,
buy, and I knew you can roll, but like some of these things that we're gonna get into is like
Some of them are
super
terrifying.
creative,
Like,
and
there's
like
one on here
oh
that
yeah,
no way I would
well,
want to touch.
I think it's one of those things that the 46 drop the lowest is the fairest way to roll stats because it'll generate a reasonable stats that can make a hero. You make an adventure, and you get less crazy variety. You get less variance with that way of rolling. Now, I'll first start off the other the main rolling method I heard of is just straight 3d6. And the problem with that is it tends to make worse stats because you're always having that low stat or a couple low stats because of the fact that you'll end up rolling a 1 or like a 1 and a 2, and it just tanks your whole your whole stat roll. Now,
See,
I
but
remember.
oh, if you
Go
don't
ahead.
mind, I actually to this point I found that similar thing on Reddit that he made a good point though, or this post made a good point, kind of like I don't know if you were going to or not, but if you make low stats and doll like characters in terms of like stat wise, but you're all struggling together, it's a lot more fun. And he's like, he made a good point. He's like, even groups that have never RP'd will do an extreme RP session for that belt of ogre strength. You know, if they're all barely scrambling to get anything. You know what I'm saying? Where if like we're going back into the old 3.5 days where 8 was the basis stat and you got mainly 8s across the board. You know what I'm saying? You're gonna try to scramble for what you can. And honestly, when doing research and reading that, that sounds like a lot of fun. It really does.
Well, I remember reading it was I don't have the photo or anything, but there was a photo of one of Gary Gygax's like handwritten pages where he was writing down rules and was very adamant about the 4d6 drop the lowest. And even though you can roll 3d6 and just get stats, it's one of those things that I think he had figured out that 4d6 drop the lowest is his preferred way, and because Gygax was kind of the godfather of D&D, it became like law,
Yeah.
for lack of a better word.
True.
But the two other methods that I had heard of that are absolutely insane to me.
I
These
would never
these
want to
are
touch this next one.
where
Never.
the the first one is extremely simple. It is one d 20. That's it, and it's one of
1d20.
those things that,
That's
like,
scary.
think about that. You could get
Yeah.
anything from a 1 to a 20,
Holy
and
shit.
that would be terrifying,
That would be great though. Can you think about the
right?
diversity?
Oh yeah, your characters would be absolutely like ridiculous, but could you imagine sitting down at the table and saying, "All right, I'm going to roll what is it? There's 6 stats. I'm going to roll 6 d20s." And then I get whatever I get is what I get. And
You
you've
pick 'em
got
in
a
order.
1, a 4 and a 7. And then you got 3 decent stats. What do I do with that? Like that's terrifying to me.
Do not put the
Hey
one
guys,
in
I will be back
intelligence.
one. I'll be back in 1 minute. My wife needs me for something. I'll be right back.
All right,
No
we will
problem.
take an intermission here. And I will do fancy audio and video editing later on.
Fancy.
Sorry about that.
Not a problem. We will have the magic of audio and video editing later on.
Fancy tricks.
I hope.
But
I think I
anyways,
can do that.
the 1d20 per set. That's crazy, bro. Like, interesting. But like, are you a gambling man?
I'm not.
Well, here's my question to you. If you're doing allocated stats, do you roll 1d20 6 time or do you roll 6d20 once?
Ooh, well, it depends. Like, honestly, if you're doing like a challenge, yeah, you just roll 1d20 6 times. But honestly, if you're just want
Oh,
to just
see,
play it as like casual, just because it sounds fun, like I do, I'd
So
probably roll six d20s and
when
then put
you're
them where I want them.
when you're saying roll 1d20 6 times, are you meaning I roll a 1d20 and then what I get I place and then roll a 1d20 and then I place?
So your strength, you come to your strength, you roll 1d20, you roll a 7. That's your strength. Move on to your dex. You roll a
Well,
well,
d20.
no,
that'd be
that
the
would be
straight.
inline.
That'd be the inline.
That
But
that would be
like,
the inline.
would you not be
Well,
able to
that's like,
roll the second or the following dice until you placed the first dice?
Well, normally with the allocated stats, you basically write down the 6 stats, whatever they are, and then you allocate them after rolling. But
okay.
the way I always see it is I have there's two sort of philosophies from this. It's people have this idea of I've got this lucky dice. This lucky dice is mine. And they have to roll that lucky D20 and be like, yes, I'm rolling that one D20 6 times. Or you have the universe is a cold, uncaring vacuum, and it doesn't really care how what kind of dice it is, what color it is. It's a tool, and you should just roll 6 of them and get it over with.
Oh,
I'm of the I am totally on the end of it is a tool. The universe doesn't care about my dice or my rolling. I'm one of those guys that I also like the big clickety clack of a bunch of like dice and going wee.
Yeah. I personally I would take a handful of d20s, all 6 of them, and throw them out and then place my stats.
yeah, I'm kind of in the middle. Like, they're 100% a tool. I understand that. But I have dice that I will never roll with for like stats for. Like skill checks,
Fair enough.
fine, but not stats. Like, you are not trustworthy enough.
Well, and the last method that I want to bring up, I read about it. It doesn't make sense to me. I still try to figure it out. Like I've tested it before and I've got decent stats, but again, it's weird. It's 3d10 minus 5.
This seems
And
like it could cause a lot of problems.
well, it had some subtext that like you couldn't have a number below a certain number, you couldn't have a number above a certain number. Because
Okay.
technically you could roll 30, like if you rolled 3 10s and you'd have a stat that's 25,
Yeah.
which makes 0 sense. Vice versa, you could roll a 4 and have a -1. See what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
it was a real weird method, and like I tried it and generated some decent stats, but it wasn't like I was like I guess I felt like it was a little like it felt like you could generate it could generate like fairly even stats, fairly playable stats, but at the same time it was one of those things where like when you roll a 22, you feel like I feel like I'm either cheating or I'm being cheated. You know what I mean?
Yeah, cuz
Yeah.
But
if you see that 22, you want that 22. You're like, "I rolled it." But then the rules say, well, you're not allowed to have above 20. So it automatically bumps
Right.
down to 20. I'd be disappointed.
Right. Well, and the last thing that we come with rolling, and I think this might be my new favorite way to generate stats, and the way I want to generate stats when I start
I
the next
gotta agree.
campaign that we do, and it's called the bingo method. And we you have the array,
Yep.
the clip for the array. Okay.
I got it up.
Basically the idea is that you generate a bingo card that has 6 across, 6 down, and you have each player roll a set of stats. And if you have 6 players, you have 6 sets of stats. And if you have 5 players, you have the DM roll a set of stats. You know, it makes everyone feel like they're contributing to everyone's stats. The other thing is that if you look and roll really shitty stats, you don't have to keep them. You can pick something else. And just to give you the example, like the bottom row of our array is a 5, 9, 9, 9, 14, 11. If I rolled those stats, I would be extremely upset. I would want to just, kill that character off almost immediately. But with this whole array, there's several different ones. And I mean, there was one where I rolled a 3. Like, that's like the hardest thing to do is to roll a 3 when you're doing, because we used 46 drop the
Actually
lowest when we were
impressive.
doing
Good
it.
job.
Right.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I noticed, I didn't roll a single 18.
Yep.
I didn't roll a single 18. I rolled a 3. I also rolled a 4. Like, I rolled a 3, a 4, a 5,
That's
and a
why
6.
you roll an 18 because you use that same probability luck spike on the negative side.
Yeah, but looking at this whole array though, it's like what would basically happen is each character, each PC would get to pick a set of stats. And once that set of stats is picked, no one else could pick that set of stats, so they'd have to choose another set of stats.
I
But
came across the
in this
same way,
method,
and like it sounds great. It sounds like it's so much fun.
well, and it incorporates everyone is the other thing that I like. And it's like looking at this array of stats, like the 5th row where you have the 12, 16, 17, 14, 13, 11. That's a great set of stats. It's really even. It's really you know, based where you're like, okay, really really cool. And the other thing that I actually could say is that if you're if you want to, you could make this an inline, so that however the stats are on the grid, those are how you're taking the stats. So it's your strength, your dex, con, so forth, so on. But it
That'd be
also
fun.
gives you it also gives you a method to the madness. So you could go, well, I'm going to start left to right versus right to left, and it could let you do something interesting with that.
Honestly, if you give them a
But
bingo method and you're giving them a pick of what they want, I would almost say that would be the normal way. Is you take it in line, and then like the unconventional or optional way is it's just you pick 6 stats and you can place them where you want.
well, and here's my question to you guys. What, like, now that you kind of have glanced over this array and see what it is, what, like, if you had to choose like 3 lines, obviously I've already mentioned line 5 across. Like, what 3 lines would you think that, oh yeah, that would be the stats I want for my PC.
I'll let you go first, Kyle.
I don't
actually
think you
haven't.
can see the array.
Yeah, I have actually can't
Oh.
see the array. So
It's on the notes.
Hold on.
And I'll throw it in staff.
I think I just did.
Okay.
Maybe.
Yeah, for some strange reason, it's not dumping.
It's not posting, yeah. Yeah, pull up the notes real quick, Kyle.
There we go.
It's
that's
in
what I'm
there.
doing.
All
Oh,
right.
there it goes.
While he's doing that, I will Joe, since you pointed out row 5, I'm thinking row 1, or I'm sorry, not row. Column 3 and corner to corner, bottom left to top right. So that's 5, 16, 13, 13, 16, 4.
Dang, you took 2 of mine.
Because even though it, like, the 1 has a 5, row 1 has an 8, and column 3 has a 9, you always will end up having a dump stat. Everything else in those columns or rows, however it might be, are phenomenal stats. Like, you could run a character in the kitty corner, you got 2 16s. In the column one that I picked, you've got a 17, 2 13s, and a 15. In the row I picked, you got 2 15s, 2 14s, and a 13. Like, each one of those, just stand alone, are very good stats. Yeah, you have an 8 in one, a 5 in another, and a 9 in another, but depending on what you're playing, you have a stat you can sacrifice.
What do you think, Kyle?
Honestly, I would go row 5, column 3, and then honestly, just to play it safe, column 1. It's just a general even character.
Well, I'm going to actually joke around this a little, but neither one of you looked at column 5. Like, there's literally your lowest stats of 12.
Oh, yeah.
True.
Okay.
That's true.
Yeah, like okay, whatever your high stat's only going to be a 16. But I mean, you have 2 14s, 2 13s, a 12, and a 16. Like, that character is not going to be bad at anything.
No.
No, that's true.
And then once you add in your racial bonuses, because that's the other thing that we're not taking into account with these, is you still get to add in your racial bonuses. Or if you use Tosh as alternate thing, you can put your racial bonuses here, there, yada yada. But it's one of those things that if you have a racial bonus that has dexterity, say you play a half elf, okay, your racial bonus is dexterity plus 2. You're set at 16 suddenly, and 18 in dex, and you could be a rogue, you could be a ranger, you could be a monk. Like, it seems like it would be very easy to make a very powerful character that's just really good at everything. And the other thing I keep thinking of is if I was playing here and I was that guy that rolled the 5, 9, 9, 14, 11. Yeah, they made the characters all in all a little weak, but then we're still looking at each one of us. We found what 5, 6 different like stat blocks that we would all be willing to play.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
And it's it's one of those things that I'm like, that's what you want. Is you're given a couple options. You're like, okay, I'm going to go with this one. Okay, I'm going to go with that one, and I'm going to have an upstep, and I'm going to have this. But you
Or
make
like,
the most of it.
or like the fact of like, oh, if you play it like you once somebody selects something, then you can't select that one also. It's
Yeah.
like someone picked
Yeah,
2 of mine, and I'm like, well, that sucks. But then I found 2 more right away. That
right.
I was willing to accept. Like, so I really like this way.
So,
And like you said earlier, everybody had a point, like a purpose in this.
yep. So now I'm going to play devil's advocate because, for instance, column 5, that is a phenomenal column. Row 5, phenomenal row. Those are going to be your 2 primary that people are looking at taking. How do you handle people wanting to take the same things and having arguments at the table? Do
You
you...
roll for initiative.
That's
Everybody
perfect.
roll.
Ooh, I
That's
like
Everybody,
that.
perfect.
everybody roll D20.
And then
There you go.
you
I
let the
like
dice
that.
decide, and then at the table you say no arguments. Dice decide. You get to pick. Now, the question would be, what if the 2 parties want to barter a trade and switch stat blocks? As a DM, I've never DM'd. Would you allow 2 players to switch their stat blocks if they came to a conclusion together at the table?
I feel that the most time, for the most part, like the people that I've played with, they don't really have that many. What's the word I'm looking for? Like
Pre-
they
Preconceived
they know
notions.
they're trying to work. Yeah, well, they have they know they're ultimately trying to
Common
work
goal.
together, and they're trying to build each other up rather than have uh fight over who's the best. And when you build each other up, everyone's like, well, I'm gonna take this stat. All right, you have that stat. I'll take these set of stats. I think there's more communication at the table and more just understanding in general, like holding holding it together so that you're like, okay, we got this.
You roll for initiative
And
to pick, but like there's gonna be discussion before the initiative pick. So everybody's just kind of on a
sure,
base, everybody's on a basic understanding that this is what I want, or I could do, or you do what you
and
did, which was perfect. Pick 3 of them, and then have 3 of them, that you'll take, and then you pick one of those 3. This way, if somebody takes it,
well,
it's gone.
and I think this is the fantasy football mind in my head where it's like if I know I'm third in order of picking stats, I'm gonna look at, well, what are the 3 best ones, because they're gonna take one. They're gonna take the two best ones. I'm gonna get the third best one, you know. And maybe somebody's like, well, I want the 516, the diagonal, versus getting the better one. They want to play into that 5, you know.
Because
Um,
And to answer your question, Thorn, um, if it's right at like picking, like right after picking, I would probably let them switch. But if it's like after you like started looking at stats and classes and everything, trying to match these stats, no.
so there'd be a minimum window. Because
Yeah. Like basically like within 5 minutes after picking your stats and talking with people, just getting a general idea.
when me and Joe sat down and rolled out these stats and built out this bingo card, it was just me and him, and it was fun, like figuring out these stats, and then the excitement watching the lines fill up, and you're like, man, that diagonal's looking kind of garbage because you have an 8, 6, 11. Man, it's not looking like very good. Like, we had a good time, just the two of us. Now, do a full party of 6 with a DM, and you're adding to your session 0 where everything's getting set up just a little bit of group bonding in the setup
Very
of the
true.
stats. Like,
Which
I
honestly
love
does way
this.
more than what you think.
I like this whole stats bingo thing. I want to do it. I think it would be great for a party, and it would add just a little bit more depth to the stats, and I dig it. I dig it a lot.
I like it too.
All right, and the other thing, now to go to the flip side of rolling, I want to talk about the standard array. Your standard array, you start with a 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, 8. Those are your stats straight up. You do, again, still get to add your racial bonuses, but you can allocate those stats however you like. If you want strength to be your main thing, okay, put that 15 in strength. You want a dex-based character. Excuse me. Put that 15 in the dexterity, or put the 14 in dexterity, and maybe put the 15 in wisdom because you're playing a monk and you want to have high wisdom, and then have your racial stats have two on dexterity, 1 on wisdom, so then you have a rounded up stat block. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do with the standard array. And just to go over point buy is a little weird, and the reason I say it's a little weird is because, like you were talking about, Kyle, is all your stats start at 8, but the catch is each one of the
You
point up.
basically you buy points in different of your stats.
Right, and if you it's one of those things that if you want a 15 in the stat, it takes 9 points. If you want 14 in a stat, it takes 7 points. 13 takes 5 points.
Because after a
12
certain
takes
point,
4.
it costs 2 points to buy 1 point of stat, right?
Yep.
Right.
Higher stats cost
And
more. Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
and the idea is you start with 27 points to allocate and add up there. And it's like you can have 2 15s, but it's like you're left with 9 total points if you go with 2 15s, and you're not going to have a lot in terms of your other 4 stats, like, or if you have a dump stat, it's going to be tricky to use. Um, and again, the advantages of that is because you're able to go, well, I have those awesome stats, but my problem is that, okay, I have those awesome stats, but they're not. You're having like built-in weaknesses that you almost have to account for.
It like
And yeah, go ahead.
we've talked about it quite a bit because we've kind of fell in love with the rule set, but like it feels like point buy would be a very gritty rules way of getting stats. Like it would point buy fits the gritty rule set more than rolling because it comes with those built-in disadvantages because of the way the
In
points work.
restraint.
Alright, now let me
Yes.
ask you guys this little twist. What if instead of 27, you give them 29, 30? Like, I've never done that as a DM. Have you guys?
I've at least tinkered with characters to see, how much more powerful they are. And the idea is the more stats or the more you're able to allocate towards stats, the more powerful the character is going to be. So it's one of those things that the DM kind of you as the DM have to kind of gauge how powerful you want the party to be. If you want it to be a
What
little more
type of
powerful,
campaign?
right? The type of campaign, what you're doing will affect that. But the idea is that if you want to make your party more powerful stat wise, give them a 29, give them a 30 points to allocate, because they're still only able to allocate up to a 15 on any given point or on any given stat. But their other stats, their dexterity, their constitution, their wisdom, those are going to be increased enough that you're going to see a difference. And it may be only a +1 in whatever that stat is, but that's going to make a big difference.
True.
And that actually kind of segues into my last type, and we actually used this the last time we started a campaign. I call it the hybrid method, and
It confused
basically
me
what it
so
is
much.
and this is the best way I have to explain it, is if you take the standard array and add up all the points that's with it, that you add up that 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, 8, you end up with the number 72. And what the hybrid method is you roll 46, drop the lowest, but you only do that for the first 5 stats. You then add up the numbers of those first 5 stats and subtract it from 72. And what that does is it basically automatically generates that 6 stat. And the problem, like with that method, what it kind of does is if you roll really good stats, it's giving you a dump stat. If you roll really bad stats, it's giving you a good stat. But
True.
The problem that I have with that method, and I've used it, it's been okay, but the problem that I have with it is that it always seems like you're never really happy with it. It's as Thorne said, it's overly complicated, especially if you have newer players. It's overly complicated. It does generate good stats, but I feel it's unnecessarily overcomplicated.
I mean, I'm an experienced player, I would say, and it took me a second to grasp what was actually happening there. It makes sense, but like I could see where
Exactly.
new people would be like, "Whoa, what the hell?"
Yeah. And again, at top of the show, I said I knew about standard array and I knew about point buy, but every game I've ever played in was like roll 46 minus the lowest, or drop the lowest. So when it came to this, I was like, you got my brain smoking, because it doesn't make sense that we're subtracting but we're adding, and like I was all over the place. Could I see myself using it? Yeah, maybe in the future. I'd want to go bingo before this, but I would give it a shot with an experienced group. I wouldn't want to do this with like a bunch of people who were new, or even with some playtime but not familiar with the way classes work and stuff like that, because this could make things sloppy, I think. Like the setup of characters could take way longer than what is needed if the people aren't experienced in placing stats and moving along, is kind of what I feel like this would lead to.
You bring up a valid point. I got
Yep.
one last twist for you.
What's that?
All right.
60/20s at advantage.
Ooh. So you're basically saying go with the roll a d20, but you're rolling it at advantage and taking the better of the two rolls.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a good way to generate stats, but
It's
I just have that feeling that you're gonna have somebody that rolls really, really bad.
it seems like you would have less terrible stats that way, well, simply because of the advantage. But I've done it. I've rolled back-to-back ones on a D20. Like, you roll back-to-back ones, or you roll a 1 and then a 4. Like, that's still pretty tough, man. Like,
Well, depending on how you're playing, as long as you're not playing inline, it's not horrible to take one dump stop.
yeah.
So I just, for shits and giggles, I've got two D20s sitting in front of me. I rolled. Do you know what my first stat would be?
7.
9. I rolled a 2 and a 9.
See, that's what terrifies me.
My second one would be a 7.
Yeah, like
Well, dang.
like if you get a bad streak on your dice, like
So
there's
basically,
no going back from that. Like, I don't know.
anybody that praises the Dice Lords and has a dice jail will not like this method.
Yeah, I would stay away from it.
I agree.
1d20 roll.
So then my question to you guys: if you guys are doing stats, what do you feel is like the next thing after you roll stats in character creation? Is it making a backstory? Is it kind of figuring out what sort of character you're playing? Like, what do you feel is the next step when making a character?
Well, if it's not inline and you can place your stats wherever you are, you basically should have an idea of what kind of character you want, anyways. So you place your stats where you're needed. The only time
All right, let's.
you would go in that order of what's next is if you play inline, which honestly, that's the way I was raised on D&D like that. So I kind of just thought that that was normal. So
For the
this is
devil's
kind of
advocate here, if you roll your stats inline, or do the bingo method inline, what, like, for instance, we'll just look at the bingo method. What sort of character are you playing if you have one? I'll say that row 5, that 12, 16, 17, 14, 13, 11. Those are your stats in order. What are you playing, Thorn, with those stats?
Give me 2 seconds because I need to double check. With those stats, I'm probably gonna play a ranger.
Okay. Kyle, you get the 15, 13, 11, 13, 17, 9. What are you playing?
which one is it? 15 what?
Column 3.
Third column. Yeah,
Column
third
3.
column.
Okay. Ooh, what is that? 17 in wisdom? That
Yeah,
would
the
be.
17 would be your wisdom.
Oh,
Your
that's
15
druid
would
all.
be strength.
I will take that as a druid all day. It's a decent stat for going into like shapeshift form for strength, and your con is kind of protected because of your shapeshift ability. You got a padded HP there, so you don't gotta really worry about that. Yeah, I'll take druid with those stats all day.
Pick one for me.
Oh, let's do the road to.
15, 6, 13,
13.
12, 16, 10.
Yep.
Ooh. At 6 in Dex hurts regardless of what I do.
But are you taking it left to right or right to left?
He's got a valid point. We never did really cover that, but like honestly, I would run it either way. I didn't give it really a thought, but yeah,
Because if you run it the other way, you're dropping your wisdom instead of your dex.
he's got a point. Fall victim to every charm there is, but like other than that, if you
I'll
run
say
it the other
this:
way, it's pretty decent.
if I were to go that way, I would either go rogue or like the other thing that pops into my head is a Dex-based paladin.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Because
can see that.
if you get the 15 as your charisma and the 16 is your Dex, then you'd
Yeah,
be able to roll off it, and it would be really good. You know what I mean?
I
But
can see it.
yeah, that's that's rolling stats. That's generating stats.
Oh wait,
Do you
okay.
guys have
Can I?
anything else?
I just want to
Go
point
ahead.
out a second. How many stat blocks have we generated out of this 36 stats? Like, this bingo method is pretty versatile. I like this. Like, we have been just pumping examples out of these.
And again, that's one of the reasons why after I've tinkered with it and was me even Brock's example or Thorn's example that we sat down, and if you're at a session 0, one of the big things is you get excited for rolling stats, and everyone's gets pumped up a bit because, oh hey, we all get to roll a bunch of dice, and it feels like you're playing Yahtzee. There's that, clickety clack math rock. It for a session 0, especially if you're doing a lot of character creation, you're helping new people to do stuff, and then everyone gets to sit down and roll stats. Everyone will get excited about that. It'll probably be the highlight of the night, regardless if they roll good or roll bad.
And just quickly going over it, when Kyle mentioned that, with this stat block that we rolled, it gives you 28 combinations for stats for characters by 6 people rolling 6 rows. You have 28 different combinations. So you can come up with a multitude of things if you go, oh no, I didn't even know. What? Man, my mind just got absolutely shattered because it's way more than 28 because I only doubled, and it would be more than doubling because you would go left to right, top to bottom, or left to right, right to left, top to bottom, bottom to top, and then the reverse of your corners, left bottom to top right, and vice versa. So this 6x6 grid gives you so many combinations of stats to play with, and then the fun of rolling it. By far, Stats Bingo is, I think, the best way to add a little bit of fun at the beginning of your campaign, and get everybody into that mood of playing together, because you're kind of relying on everybody at the table to determine your stats at that point.
And it gets rid of the, well, I rolled really bad. The DM even tried to let me re-roll, and I still re-rolled really bad.
Mm-hmm.
Like this, I can just pick a different stat block. Like, yes, I help
Yeah,
contribute, but my bad roll is just one person's dump stat. Like, no, instead of my entire bad character.
But I think that's basically everything. We've went over a ton of different ways to roll stats. We went over our top stats. This was just it was the math episode. We had to get it out of the way for episode 10, get all the numbers out there, talk numbers all night long. Um anything else? I don't think there's anything else. I think we're good to go. So you can find the show over on Twitter at DragonHeads2 and email the show right here, dragonheads216@gmail.com. And join us on our Discord, discord.me/dragonheads. And then follow the show over on Twitch. We do record live, typically Monday nights around 9-ish Eastern over at twitch.tv/dragonheadspod. Catch us over on YouTube. We don't have an official link yet. We need those follows. Or, sorry, subscribes. All these websites having their different terminologies. Go over to YouTube. Just search for Dragon Heads Pod and hit the subscribe button. It will help us out in getting our official link. Our intro music, Self-Induced Psychosis by my buddy, Mr. Kyle Wynn. That's it, everybody. Everybody have a great night. Get out there and slay some dragons.
good luck, adventurers.
Good luck rolling stats, guys.